Welcome. Hello. I'm so glad to be here with all of you today. My name is Francisco Ramirez. I am a co-founder of OK So. And today we're going to be talking about how to respond when we have those moments where a young person has said something and we just don't know what to say next. And before we jump in, I want to mention that one of the things that you get with every training from OK So is a worksheet that you can download to accompany these sessions. And in fact, if you can print it out today, it's going to be extra awesome, extra special, extra helpful. But if you can't, no worries, but do at least have it right next to you. We'll be referencing it a lot throughout the training today, and I want to make sure that you can follow along. Okay, so here we are, ready today to talk about what to say when you don't know what to say. And to kick us off today, let's slow down for a moment and do some reflecting about what those moments are like for us when a young person says something that feels overwhelming. So I'll give you some instructions for this first activity, and then I'll invite you to hit pause on this video. In fact, there will probably be several times during this training when you'll have the opportunity to reflect or do work on the worksheet. And I really encourage you to just take a brief moment to hit pause whenever you wish to notice or collect your thoughts before you continue on. It really does make a difference. All right, so the instructions are here on screen, but I will walk you through them. The first thing I'd like you to do is think about a time when a young person shared something overwhelming or hard for you. Think of that time. Someone that you support, a young person, shared something really overwhelming or hard for you. And as you look for that moment, I'm going to suggest or encourage you to find a very specific time that you can remember. It makes this a bit easier. Take that moment to go through your mental archive here, this moment when a young person shared something overwhelming, hard for you. Could be long ago, it could be really recent. And now, hopefully that you have this in mind, and if you don't, you can, again, hit pause. Now that you have it in mind, I'd like you to replay it for a moment, like as if you're watching a movie. And as you do, notice what was happening. In fact, what were you thinking in that moment? What was going through your mind? Take a moment. What were you thinking about? What was alive in your head? So again, if you're not quite ready to move on just yet, no problem. Just hit pause until you're ready. Okay, now that you've done that, let's talk about why we can feel overwhelmed when these things happen. And I want you to do a little bit of brainstorming first. So go back to your worksheet and write down, why do we feel overwhelmed? Take a second and jot those ideas down on your worksheet. Why do we feel overwhelmed? By the way, there are no judgments with your responses now or ever. Take that moment. Why do we feel overwhelmed? Even if it's a few words or ideas, what makes us feel overwhelmed in those moments? Okay. You have some ideas written down? Hopefully, yes. Okay. These here that I'm going to show on screen are some reasons why we can feel overwhelmed. And you may have others that I missed, and that's totally fine. That's actually great. This that you're going to look at here is just a list, right? And the first, as you can see here, is that we often feel overwhelmed because we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves to get it right. And this idea of right is in quotes because obviously, or maybe not obviously, there isn't always a right thing to do. And we also might have a very specific idea of what right should look like. Right? We have an idea of what we should be doing. And so in that moment, we're just focused on doing the right thing, whatever that might be for us. Another reason is simply that hard things feel hard. Obvious, but it's worth exploring, right? When someone is dealing with something difficult, it can be really hard to be a part of that. And especially if the other person is overwhelmed, we can start to feel that way too. It's a lot to be around someone who's going through something that is hard. We can also sometimes feel triggered by what a young person might be sharing with us or how they're feeling. Perhaps we've experienced something similar in our past, or it reminds us of a personal situation. And yet, it's really hard to be trying to support someone else while we're having our own emotional experience as well. Another reason that we might feel overwhelmed is because we feel like we need to say something because we're uncomfortable with sitting in silence. And it makes sense because we're actually not really taught how to do this. Often we see in movies or television or social media that silence somehow has to equal awkward or wrong or discomfort. And so we feel like we need to fill that space with something, with anything, because just saying something is better than saying nothing. That's at least what we think. Another reason is that sometimes we're just not fully present with what's happening, right? There's a lot going on in the world, and maybe we've got our own stuff going on, or it's a really busy day, or we're late for a meeting with someone who hates it when we're late for the meeting, right? So sometimes it can feel like the other person's stuff, their story, their experience is somehow getting in the way of our own journey, our own day, right? Even though that's not, of course, how the other person would see it. And lastly, we can feel overwhelmed because we're trying to problem solve and figure out what to do. But the real truth is that we don't know always what to do. We don't always know what happens next. And so if inside we don't really know what the next steps are, we can actually be kind of freaking out about that, searching for the next stepping stone. Right? We're not here, we're in the next. We're searching. Yeah? Okay. So this is our list. And in fact, there might be something else happening for you as well. And I'd like you to notice that for a moment. In fact, we're going to give you an opportunity to get hands-on with this list right now. Okay, so now that we've gone over some of the most common reasons, we want you to really take a moment for yourself to think about what's happening for you. And you can see here this pie chart with each of these sections. Feeling like we have to get it right, hard things feel hard, feeling triggered, uncomfortable with silence, not being fully present, and not knowing what happens next. What we'd like you to do is think about what happens for you in these moments that you don't know what to say. And I'll actually invite you to take a pen or a pencil and actually shade in each slice of this pie chart on your worksheet to represent how much each one feels like you in that moment. So go section by section, slice by slice, and shade in how much you feel like that experience is what happens for you. For example, if you feel like not knowing what's happening next is absolutely happening for you, well, you'll shade it all the way or mostly, just as you can see here. If it's just slightly that you feel discomfort around silence, then you'll shade that in just a little bit, and so on. We've also left this blank spot here on the left So if you feel like there's something else entirely that's happening for you, we'd like you to fill that in. And by the way, even if you don't have this printed out, I'm going to encourage you to find another way to represent this on a piece of paper for yourself or on a document. Check marks, dots, notes, right? What we want is for you to be more and more in touch with what really speaks to you and your experience. So take a moment to do this. This step is critical, and I'll take a moment here for it as well. It may shift from conversation to conversation, but what's your best guess? Generally speaking, which of these is most present for you? You may already know it. It may be a surprise to you. See what shows up. And again, feel free to hit pause here for a moment and then come back as I move on. Okay. Now for this next piece here, we're going to turn the tables a bit. Because up until now, we've been thinking about those times that someone has come to you with a hard thing. But now we're actually going to think back to a recent time that you shared something with another person in your life. Not the time that you were the responder, but the time that you were going through something hard. And I'll say for this one, you don't even need to hit pause. I'll walk you through this entire activity.